we are back with Health Hacker Life. TJ Anderson, your host here today with a very impeccable genius in the health optimization, longevity medicine space, Chief Medical Officer and Science Officer of Fountain Life, Dr. Helen Messier. Welcome to Health Hacker Life.
Thank you, TJ. Just such a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have fun today and learn a little bit about what you're up to right now. Who is Fountain Life and what sort of work you guys are doing. So if you want to start there, describing a little bit about who Fountain Life is and your intention in your work, that'd be great.
That's not a small question to start. Let's give it a shot. Yeah. So, I'm just very excited to sort of be part of Fountain Life and kind of, we have very big goals and a big mission. And really, it's all about changing the conversation around healthcare, going from a very reactive model, which I think all of you know is, symptomatic reactive care, which is our current healthcare system, to moving it to a very proactive, preventative, precision, approach to healthcare. So Fountain Life was really founded by, Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis and Bill Kapp. And we really, again, it's meant to be change that conversation. So we have currently, there's a lot of components to what we're doing at Fountain Life. We have 4 brick and mortar centers currently, across the U.S. We're here in Orlando, which is where I am right now, where our headquarters is. We have a center in Naples as well, one in New York and one in Dallas, Texas. And in our centers, we do this very cutting edge precision diagnostic testing. And it's really aimed at, again, catching things early. So focused around longevity. And as Peter Diamandis often says, the first step to longevity is not dying of something stupid. So the idea of what's stupid to die of? Well, we know that cardiovascular disease is really stupid because it still kills more people than anything else across our country, around our world, men and women. The first sign of cardiovascular disease is a heart attack or sudden death in most people. So by the time you have symptoms of cardiovascular disease, it is way too late. You cannot wait there. You have to find that early. And the good news is you can reverse it when you find it early and prevent it from ever becoming a problem. So, we're focused on those leading causes of morbidity, mortality. So cardiovascular being obviously the big one, cancer being another one. Well, it's a no-brainer. If we find cancer early, way easier to treat. And, than if you find late stage cancer. And again, these things are all asymptomatic, before, until they're very late stage. Metabolic disease, prediabetes is just so rampant. Neurocognitive diseases. So we're really focused at finding very early signs of those diseases and then wrapping that around the why. So what you might have, but also from a root cause perspective, why might you have it? So our centers, we have full body MRIs in our centers. We have CT scans where we do CCTAs. We use AI overlays where we can characterize your plaque really, really in depth. And we can find that soft, vulnerable plaque. A lot of people are probably familiar with calcium scans, coronary calcium scans. By the time you have calcium on your scan, that's already late. We even want to find it before that because the soft stuff, the stuff that's really dangerous, is the stuff that's there before you even get before it gets calcified. By the time you get calcified, it's, a nice little brick wall around it. Yeah, and then we add in, good DEXA scans, a real comprehensive set of blood work. We do a early cancer, multi-cancer early detection blood screen. We look at, oral and gut microbiome and we can go on to all of them if you want. But really, Fountain Life is set to do early, precision diagnostics and then combined with optimized care. So now we find things and we address them. You get a care team where led by a longevity physician and a nurse, a nutritionist, a health coach, care coordinator to really help you make those changes and really optimize your health and longevity. So that's the brick and mortar centers.
Right.
There's a number of programs in there. And then we're also launching a digital membership as well that will be delivered through an app where you can get blood work done and then visit more telemedicine visits with your physician for health optimization. And then that becomes an on-ramp if you need testing in our centers as well.
Beautiful.
So that's just a very quick overview.
Yeah. The heart stuff for me personally is something that I'm curious about optimizing more for myself.
Yeah.
And, I have a bone to pick with the approach, and I know it's necessary, but my local doctor out here in Boulder, I was interested in doing that, the AI, I think it's Clearly, that looks at the plaque, and I was scheduled and was ready to go into the tube for the contrast with for the CCTA, and I almost passed out beforehand. I was I don't know, probably in my head and freaking out, but something about having the dye injected in me was scaring me. But so I was not able to move forward with that. But I'd like to, because I've had high LDL for a while, which I'm not terribly concerned about because of what I know about that. However, digging in deeper, looking to help hack things like Lp(a) and ApoB and, plaque 2 and just, some more advanced markers on, so I guess I'm curious, which of those that you can get from just a regular, not regular, but just from a blood test, do you think are some of the more important markers to focus on, Lp(a), ApoB, et cetera? And have you found anything that works, to help lower that?
Yeah.
Ideally nutritionally or supplementally, but I guess medicine possibly, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you mentioned the higher LDL, yes, we all need cholesterol to survive. All of our cell membranes are made of cholesterol. Our hormones are made of cholesterol. Obviously it's really important. Without cholesterol, we all die. Right. So cholesterol is not necessarily the bad thing, but you have to look at it in conjunction with, and I would really encourage you, TJ, to get the CCTA.
To find a way to not get in my head about it, yeah.
Someone who has a lot of plaque and a lot of vulnerable plaque, then I have a different view of their LDL levels and ApoB levels than someone who doesn't, right? So really taking the data into context matters. And so, you may be at high risk, and we might need to drive your ApoB down really significantly. And ApoB is correlated. It's actually the way we measure LDL particle number. So every ApoB, that's the protein that carries the LDL particle around. So that really, ApoB is a measure of the LDL particle number, not necessarily the size, but the number. And so we may need to get more aggressive with the cholesterol markers. We may need to get, Lp(a) is often hereditary. There's not a lot you can do right now. However, there is research being done into a drug around that. Looking at some of so I think all of these biomarkers are critical. The inflammatory markers that you mentioned, the plaque, right? The PLA2, the MPO, myeloperoxidase, right. CRP, looking at some of the inflammatory markers is also really important. I was just talking to some researchers at Oxford yesterday, and we're actually looking at bringing in this technology, is they're able to measure through a CCTA again, the inflammation in the arteries. So not just the plaque, which plaque is important, but looking at the inflammation, looking at the perivascular fat, and being able to very well quantify inflammation. And now what's really interesting in that is the people in the highest quartile of inflammation on this test had much higher rates of cardiovascular disease and death than over 5 to 10 years than the ones that were in the lower 3 quartiles. And this held true even for those who had zero plaque in their arteries. So even if you had pristine arteries, no sign of plaque, if you had high inflammation in your arteries, you're much higher risk of dying of a heart attack.
And that inflammation is like you said, MPO, myeloperoxidase,
well,
plaque 2.
So they looked at CRP to see if that correlated, and it was a very, very weak correlation. Right. We still have to look at MPO. So this is a a company called Caristo out of the UK. They're not approved by the FDA yet, but I think we can bring them in through a clinical trial and have them available here. So, that's the kind of thing we're always looking at how much, more upstream can we get, right? We want to get earlier and earlier, to be able to see things, as early as possible.
Exactly.
So to your point, those inflammatory markers are important, as are, the cholesterol levels, again, in context of everything. Now, if you asked me from our data so far, and this is another really exciting thing that we're doing at Fountain Life, is we have a very comprehensive set of data now, because we're getting the CCTA results, we're getting all of the blood work, we're looking at all of this in context together.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is that preliminary results, but the biggest marker that is going to predict plaque, hemoglobin A1C. So, and of course, hemoglobin A1C is a marker of blood sugar, right? Your average blood sugar over the course of the last 3 months. And so we know that blood sugar is critical, keeping that under control in order to control heart disease. And now you want to ask why? It makes sense. Like, we know that diabetics have higher risks of heart disease and a lot of other things, but I don't know if your audience or if you've ever talked about the endothelial glycocalyx, right? Which is
that's a mouthful for sure. I've heard of it. Endothelial glycocalyx.
Yeah, calyx. Yeah, exactly. So the endothelium, that's the inside layer of all our blood vessels, right? So that's the single cell layer. And that endothelium, it's very metabolically active. It makes a bunch of stuff, like the big one being nitric oxide, right? So in order for our vessels to expand and contract, it does that with nitric oxide. When it produces nitric oxide, they expand. When it goes down, they contract. So that endothelium is really important. And when that endothelium becomes dysfunctional, that's the first step, or we used to think first step to cardiovascular disease. What we know now, and this is relatively recent understanding, is on the inside of that, sticking out from the endothelium, is the glycocalyx. So glyco just means sugar, right? Glycans, glyco. And calyx is just a big complex structure. So it's a structure, a very, very complicated branch chain polysaccharide sugar molecules, complex sugar molecules that are sticking out from this endothelial layer. And that, it turns out, acts like a Teflon coating. So it's almost like a mucus layer. Mucus is made out of these polysaccharides as well, right? These, we call them glycosaminoglycans and things like that. But that's a Teflon coating for our arteries. And they're little hair-like projections that are signal transducers. So as the blood flows by, these things, that it pushes on these little hairs, and that sends the signal to the endothelium that you need to open up the arteries, for example. And then it also prevents your blood cells from sticking to the lining of the arteries, because it's a negative charge and it repels the negative charge on your platelets and your white and your red blood cells. We didn't have that. Our blood cells would stick everywhere. So it's really important to maintain a very healthy glycocalyx. What's the one thing that we know more than anything breaks down the glycocalyx is blood sugar. And so now we can see how critical that is. We've gotten caught up on cholesterol for so long, and I think we've forgotten that there's a lot of other things involved as well.
Yeah, 100%. I'll muster up the courage to go through it again. I know it's important, and it's on the next frontier of like full context data, right? And because, like you said, having that analysis, CCTA with the AI overlaid allows you to better understand how the rest of the biomarkers are in terms of risk level. Yeah, I remember when I first heard of Fountain Life, I was actually reading, I think, Tony's recent books a couple of years ago.
Life Force, maybe?
Yeah, Life Force, getting into all the longevity hacks that, he's been learning about and playing with over the years. That was a great read. I'm curious, like, what kind of, is all of this cash pay? Is some of it insurance? What kind of clientele, what kind of patients are you guys working with? That sort of thing.
Yeah, it is currently all cash pay, so it's a membership fee. So it's an annual fee, which includes all of the testing and then the care from your care team as well and your physician. It is a little bit more expensive for people who can afford it. It's a no-brainer. The value is really amazing. Having helped design and put all of these tests together, that's what I want.
Right. It is. Yeah. It's an investment, right? And it's in people that have the means and the awareness of the importance of their own health and longevity. They know that it's worth it because they're going to see the return. So how did Tony and Peter snag you out from to join the team? I know you and I first got connected, I think, through when you were with the IFM, Institute for Functional Medicine. Yeah. What were you doing before?
I still teach for IFM. I'm still part of the Institute for Functional Medicine on their faculty. Yeah. One of the educators. But, this has been kind of my dream for my career as well, is I call myself the translational medicine person, right? So I started my career as a scientist. So I did my PhD in molecular immunology and really got deep into the science of things, and then went, wow, this is great. I know a ton about, T cell receptors, but there's so much more. And there's so much more that we can use I actually wanted to take all that amazing learning and discovery and apply it so that we could take advantage of that learning in real time. So I thought medicine's probably the way I can do that. So I went into medicine and I got out into medical practice, and in primary care, 80% of what I saw was chronic disease. And I got kind of frustrated because I wasn't really making a difference for people. I could give them symptom control, painkillers, high blood pressure meds, or whatever it was, but I wasn't actually impacting the progression of their disease. It would still keep going. And so it got me going, there's got to be something more. I went back and started reading the literature, the scientific literature, and went, wow, there is a lot of stuff here that we never learned in med school. How come we don't have access to this right now? It's, we need to be able to take all this amazing stuff and actually help people in real time, not wait the 15 to 20 years, which is the translational gap that it takes for things to make it into clinical practice. And if they make it at all, that's the next challenge. So that's really what I call that translational medicine, is bringing that in real time. And I started doing this, started playing around with it, and treating these diseases that nobody else wanted to touch, the fibromyalgia, the chronic fatigue, the irritable bowel, those are the syndromes that, in medicine, we don't have any answers for. And I was taught, well, you give them an antidepressant. That was kind of the end stage of where we could go in medicine. And so I just started doing it. And that's where I discovered that, wow, I'm not alone. There's other people that think like this in the functional medicine world. And sort of just started developing that. Through that, I started, founded a series of concierge practices across Canada. That was one of I found that in that, that allowed me to go deep and spend time with people and start to figure it out and figure out what the root cause of things were. And then through all of that and many iterations, I ended up at Human Longevity. And that was the company that, again, Craig Venter back then and Peter Diamandis also started in San Diego. I was the medical director of genomics down there right before we even started the health nucleus. So that's how I got to know Peter. So a number of iterations after that, after the pandemic, I got this phone call saying, we need you at Fountain Life. And so I just, that's kind of how it all happened.
Like, we need you specifically. You're our expert. That is the perfect person for this role. Yeah.
Couldn't be a better fit because, I love the big data. I love the medicine, the cutting edge, bringing it all together and creating this and making this available for people. And, one of the nice things about what we're doing at Fountain Life is we also can influence the influencers. So first of all, we're proving that what we do works. We're proving that you can actually save money when you're proactive in the front end rather than wait to treat late stage disease. We're proving that, you mentioned certain biomarkers, eventually not everyone can afford an MRI or a CT scan, but by collecting this comprehensive data, we're now going to be able to predict maybe what are the few biomarkers, blood biomarkers that really predict who might need the scan, or maybe you don't need the scan at all in the future. And so we really want to both help a lot of people influence the whole conversation around medicine, show that it's cost saving, and then also improve what we're doing and being much more proactive and predictive. And, if we don't do something, I mean, I think you know it, your listeners know it, population is aging. That's why we're all talking about longevity right now. We call it the silver tsunami. We know that aging is the biggest risk factor for chronic disease. And so we already do have an epidemic of chronic disease. And our system, the way it's set up, it cannot handle that. If we wait to treat with very expensive end-stage treatments, people's biggest spending on healthcare is in their last years of life, we will go bankrupt as a country, as the world. It's already starting in Japan. We're seeing this. And so we're saying that there's an alternative, and we're trying to prove that alternative works.
100%. Yeah. I actually wrote about HLI, Human Longevity Institute. They're not around anymore, right?
They're still there. But,
okay.
I think, without saying anything else, I'm here. And
right.
I think
fair enough.
Really forward, and they're still doing what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. So the full body MRI, I have I'm curious, like, how much data do we have on the effects of those MRIs, like the exposure to the potential radiation or just the body? Like do we know what the long-term, like, can too many MRIs be too much on the body? That's one curiosity I have, and I've heard different people talk and take different sides of that. Obviously, capturing a lot of data is great, but is there any sort of drop-off and or negative effect from too much exposure to that sort of imaging? Have you seen any of that? Have you guys talk about that amongst your patients?
So it's a great question. And I think a lot of people are really interested in that. So with the MRI and, particular, there is no ionizing radiation. So it's really a big magnet that aligns your hydrogen cells or hydrogen atoms, essentially. And so there's no harm that comes from that. You can do it on pregnant women, anybody, as many times as you want without any harm, because there is no radiation involved in an MRI. Sometimes you have to be careful. You can't do it if you have metal in your body, because it is a pretty big, powerful magnet.
I had to take off my permanent jewelry, actually.
Yep. You have to take your jewelry off because it'll get sucked into the MRI. No Oura rings while you're in there. And it can heat things up like metals and stuff like that. So you do have to be a little careful with that. But taking those out of the equation, it's extremely safe. Now, the CAT scan, the CT scan, is radiation. And so we do measure the amount of radiation you get. It's equivalent to kind of a cross-country flight, because we get radiation everywhere, whether we're,
right.
Especially when we fly, because we're really high and close to the radiation. But and we minimize that as much as possible with, it's very short burst, like an X-ray, that you get with your dentist and other things. So there is a little bit of radiation with the CT scan, not from the dye itself, but from the actual scan. And the dye is just an iodine-based dye that, your kidneys they pee it out very quickly.
Yeah, there's just something about, like, injecting myself with dye that's just like, ugh,
All that dye, I guess it's only dye to the CT scan. Right. It's iodine.
Right. Okay. Maybe I need some NLP on it, or some visualization and some hypnotherapy to get me through that. I mean, a lot of people are afraid of just getting their blood drawn, right? Needles in general, which I'm not terribly afraid of that. But well, that's great to know. So MRIs virtually safe, no radiation there. The radiation in a CT is the equivalent of a cross country flight. Yeah, and at the dentist, I've seen when they give you, when you have an X-ray, they also have like a pamphlet that shows like all the different types of radiation and the quantity of that. And so it definitely needs to be put into context. You might not want to be doing it every day, but once in a while
want to do it every day.
to capture great data.
Exactly. Once a year, once every, is a very different story. And there's also supplements you can take to start protecting you from radiation. There's some really interesting publications that show that alpha lipoic acid can protect you from some of the harmful effects of ionizing radiation. So for those of you that fly across the country or are getting x-rays, that would be something to look at.
Okay, so alpha lipoic acid, so ALA, right?
ALA. Mm-hmm.
That's a supplement that people can take to hack the effects of radiation, whether it's from flying across the country or across the world, or even like before and after a CT?
Yes.
Okay.
There's exactly, it's a hack, right? No big studies have been done on CT scans, but there have been studies done on ALA and radiation. So
interesting.
And it's really helpful in lots of ways, including helping your blood sugar and your mitochondrial function. So it's a great supplement.
Amazing. My physician, Dr. Catherine Zagoni, actually recently recommended, I think maybe that and CoQ10. There was some data specifically about its effect on lowering LP(a). But so for us, we have a lot of clients with our chef business, a lot of pro athletes that travel across the country all the time. So making recommendations to help them hack the radiation from that. They probably don't even realize they're getting radiated, but it's a lot on the system. What are some of your personal protocols right now in your lifestyle, or some big new longevity hacks or supplements or genes or, et cetera, that you're seeing that you're taking action on personally with your own health or in practice? I'm curious, what's the latest and greatest?
Yeah, the latest and greatest. Well, there's a lot. I would be remiss if I said the latest and greatest always works better on a foundation of the basics. So
the fundamentals.
We can't forget the fundamentals, the lifestyle. We can't forget the sleep. We can't forget the proper diet, the exercise, the stress management or mitigation, critical. So, everyone seems to be looking for the magic bullet, but that's really, we can't forget that. And so when you do the magic bullet, so to speak, on top of the foundation, the fundamentals, then things work way better too.
100%.
And, so one of the things that I just did, that we now have in our Lake Nona location or here in Orlando is TPE, or plasmapheresis, total plasma exchange. I don't know if you've heard of it. The idea of it started back with the parabiosis experiment. So parabiosis, they took an old mouse and a young mouse, and this is in the Convoy lab in I think they're at Berkeley in Northern California, basically took an old mouse and young mouse and stitched their circulatory systems together. And so they basically shared blood supply. So the blood of the old mouse went into the young mouse and vice versa. And now it's not a great thing, but these poor little mice, they do this. But what happened was the young mouse became a little older and the old mouse became younger. Right. So from the gray hair to all of the things that happen when these mice age. So that got a lot of people thinking, wow, what's going on with this? There's something in the young blood, right? There's rejuvenating factors in the young blood that are making the keeping the young and it's rejuvenating the old mouse. So that started a whole concept of young blood. Right? This idea of let's get the blood from young 18-year-olds and let's give it to 70-year-olds and we're gonna reverse the effects of aging. Now,
like vampires, right? Going up.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't quite work that way. It was pretty problematic. It caused a lot of problems. But the opposite of that is there something in the blood of the old mouse that causes aging that was then shared with the young mouse, right? So is it young factors or old factors? Turns out it's probably a combination of both. But if we think of these aging factors, well, we know this, right? We know the hallmarks of aging. We know that as you get older and inflammation goes up and, you get a lot of inflammatory molecules and all sorts of things building up in your system. And we're working with Dr. Dobry Kiprov for doing this, and he's done some amazing publications. Turns out we can mimic that effect by taking out your blood a little bit at a time, not all at once, but we take it out, we run it through a machine, and we separate out your blood cells, your white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets, and we take away your plasma, so the liquid portion of your blood. that gets removed. That has the inflammatory factors, the antibodies, all of the other stuff in it. And we replace it back with just saline, a salt solution, and albumin, which is the most abundant protein in your blood, and give your cells back, of course. You get your white and red blood cells and platelets back. And that's why we call it a total or a therapeutic plasma exchange. It's like changing your oil. And so we're removing all those factors. There's been a number of really good human studies now that show with anti-aging, and Dr. Kiprov has published one of them, and he's got more on the way. When we look at factors in aging, so things like your epigenetic age, right, your methylation age, things like your grip strength and your walking speed, and these are all things that kind of get worse as we get older, that with each plasma exchange, and we did the 6 of them over the course of a year, all of those aging parameters improved. And they improved with each treatment and got better and better. And so is one of the best things you can do from a longevity perspective that's very safe. I mean, these machines have been used in the medical world for, decades, really. We've had that ability to, we use them for severe autoimmune diseases or familial, like genetic high cholesterol, that we can remove all the cholesterol. You can remove all of the, antibodies. You can remove all of these harmful factors. So this technology has been around a long time, but the use in longevity and anti-aging and optimizing health is new. And so now we have that ability to do that. And we're offering that now here at Fountain Life. And I had the opportunity to test our machine and do that. And so,
you're going to be one of the guinea pigs on it. Yeah.
I'm one of the guinea pigs. Yeah. Yeah.
So is this different than, where they do like a 5-pass or a 10-pass? Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Where they take the blood out and they like oxygenate it. Ozone. Yeah.
Yeah. This is different than that. Yeah. This is not, it's taking all of the old liquid portion of your blood, and you see it collecting in a bag, and, in some people it looks pretty disgusting. Yeah. Wow. Some of the stuff that's floating around. And so you think of it like you're changing the old oil, essentially, right? Yeah.
My dad wrote a book. So my dad, I'm looking at my bookshelf. He's an expert he's like the world's top expert in antique gas pumps.
Oh, wow.
It's very niche. He's run his own business for probably around 40 years, buying and selling antique gas station memorabilia, and they have a mail order business. And anyways, he wrote a book younger called Check the Oil. And, we need to do the same for ourselves, and then even change the oil. That's interesting. Oil. Right.
Yeah. It turns out that 6 treatments are good because, if you imagine a really dirty engine, right, and you change the oil once, which is great. Now you add fresh oil back in. If the engine's really dirty, that oil is going to get dirty again, right? So you run that oil for a bit, change it again, put fresh stuff in, run it again. And over the course of 6 treatments, you've actually cleaned out all of the junk in the engine.
This is different from ozone, but I'm curious. It sounds similar, but is there any potential Herx reaction to this, like a negative downside from it? Because there are from ozone, right? There is.
Yeah, no, because we're not adding anything allergic like ozone or changing anything back. You're getting your blood cells back. You are getting albumin. Anytime we do anything, there's a chance of allergies. But it's blood albumin floats around in everybody's bloodstream, so that's unlikely. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a low blood pressure. Sometimes you can get a little bit of tingling in your fingers and toes. That just means we just have to give you some more calcium. So all of it is easily managed, but it's a very safe procedure in the right hands. Very safe.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I'm interested in that. Cool. Let's see here. Where do we want to go from here? Is ozone something you guys offer? Do you guys do?
We're not doing ozone right now. No. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think depending on what you're trying to treat, ozone we know can be anti microbial and things like that. It could be used, I think, in the right context, in the right hands. I think it's not really for everybody all the time, but right. If you had cancer or then that's something you could look at for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, in terms of the foundational elements, you probably start and support all your patients on those aspects of lifestyle, environment, et cetera. What do you find are some like big triggers, like the heavy hitters, the small hinges that swing big doors sort of things, that make the biggest impact on the patient population that you're seeing?
Yeah. So again, a really good question. And I think there's a lot of big hitters that work in the right individual. And so I just, I really want to stress that, there's not one thing that's perfect for everybody that's going to move the needle for everybody. Yeah. So I think that's really the importance of testing first, so you can target things, right? The sniper versus the carpet bomb. You really want to make sure that you target it. So even, people ask me, what's a supplement that everybody should take? Well,
yeah,
maybe vitamin D. And then you think, well, no, some people's vitamin D levels are good, so test your vitamin D levels, and maybe you need them, maybe you don't. You can say omega-3 fatty acids. Well, you should test those too, because maybe not everybody needs those, although vast majority of people do. That's very true. Magnesium, things like that. If we want to stay in, things like alpha lipoic acid, I think are fantastic. Anything that really supports your mitochondrial function. So the mitochondria, of course, are the power plants of your cell. And it turns out that when those become dysfunctional, those are going to be, that underlies almost all chronic disease. So not just aging, but all chronic disease. Cancer is a mitochondrial disease. Diabetes, heart disease, they are all mitochondrial diseases. Brain fog, neurological diseases. And so if you can optimize mitochondrial function, you're going to go a long way. So mitochondria need B vitamins. They need, you mentioned CoQ10, that can help, right? It's great to measure levels. They need magnesium. Alpha lipoic acid can go a long way to supporting your mitochondria, but your mitochondria also need exercise, right? So if we don't, just like muscles, right? How do we get more muscle mass? We get it by lifting weights. We get it by stressing our muscles, and we actually damage our muscles a little bit when we lift weights. When we use them, we get these little micro tears, and it's the process of repairing that makes them stronger and bigger. Mitochondria too, we need to stress them in order to send a signal to them to become more efficient and even to replicate and make more of them. And so it turns out that the best way to stimulate mitochondrial efficiency is through zone 2 training. Now this is really...
I've heard this. Oh yeah. A lot of people are like espousing zone 2 on social media, like crazy these days. Tell us about
this. All comes from the research of Inigo San Millan out of the University of Colorado in our neighborhood. He was a former Tour de France cyclist, and he works with the Tour de France cyclists still. And he's published some amazing papers and done some great research on this. So it turns out that mitochondria, when we're at rest, they burn fat, right? So you and I right now, we should be burning fat. And we burn fat with the use of oxygen. So we use oxygen and the fat, it goes through our Krebs cycle, then our electron transport chain makes ATP, which is our body's energy currency. Now, if we start stressing and if we have more demand for energy than we can meet with fat and with oxygen, we're going to switch to anaerobic metabolism, meaning we're going to start making energy without the use of oxygen, called glycolysis. And that's when we start burning sugar. And when we do that, that produces a lot of lactic acid. It produces, that's the byproduct of making energy without oxygen is lactic acid. So your lactic acid goes up, and it can also cause a lot of oxidative stress. It can damage your mitochondria. So now it's good to do that every once in a while, but not all the time.
Like hormesis, right? Like good stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. But when you work out at zone 2, what zone 2 is kind of that, the work that you're doing, your heart rate, the power that you're putting out at the exact point where your mitochondria are going to switch from burning fat to burning sugar. And so right at that stage, and that's going to be a little bit different for everyone, right? Their zone 2, their heart rates are not going to be the same. The amount of work that you can put out, an elite cyclist can work pretty hard and still be in zone 2 versus the couch potato that might just be a short, like easy walk, that would be zone 2 for them. So, but by doing that, what you're doing is telling your mitochondria, can't quite keep up. I'm not causing too much damage yet, but I can't keep up. So I need you to become more efficient. So it's a signal to your body and your mitochondria to become more efficient and to help you meet the demands that you're placing on it.
Interesting. So hopping between fat burning, oxygen burning to the sugar burning, like right at that junction is zone 2. So is there like a range? Right. Is this all calculated?
Yeah, it would be a heart rate. Yeah, it would be a heart rate zone. Kind of, we can test it. We can do a lactate threshold test and do that, measure it for you individually. But it'll be about a 5 heartbeat range kind of for people. And of course, the more in shape you get, that will change as well. And so, it could be anywhere. For most people, it'll be kind of a fast walk. It'll be where you can still carry on a conversation, but you might just need to take a few more breaths than you normally would. Kind of that level is usually what a zone 2 is. And, if you're...
So most people, define most people. Yeah. Like if we're talking some
athlete, you can be running and be able to carry on a conversation.
Or cycling.
Or cycling.
So some sort of cardio. So this is some sort of cardiovascular activity then.
It's a cardiovascular activity. Yes. Yes. But most people, I guess, depending on who you are, it'll be, again, using feeling for how much oxygen you need is kind of the guide.
Well, you touched on something earlier that I want to come back around to, and that is the, one thing that's on my mind as well personally, and on a lot of people's minds, is cognitive decline. I think I read somewhere back in David Perlmutter's book, The Grain Brain, that more people fear getting Alzheimer's or dementia than they fear death. And I don't know if that's still true, but in terms of what they fear the most, but that goes to show like how this is top of mind for a lot of people as they age. I'm curious, what are your, besides, just looking at the Alzheimer's genes that someone may or may not have and be predisposed to, what are the other advanced testing that you can look at to catch that before it becomes diagnosed? Because I've heard that most people that are diagnosed with it's been going on already for like a decade or longer. And it's something that, has affected a lot of aspects of my family and a family member on my mom's side. And so it's something that's really important to me and my family and a lot of people in the world, right? And it's really scary. Are you guys doing a fair amount of work and support for patients in this? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, huge, right? It is, one of those 4 big drivers of morbidity and mortality. It's something that everybody, rightly probably fears. And, I was listening to the radio and they were talking about the epidemic of Alzheimer's and dementia that's coming with our aging population right now. And the answer was, let's build more nursing homes, right? So to me, that's just it's not the right answer. So number one, it's a lot easier to prevent it than to treat it late stage. So you do want to catch any signs early, but then also the things that can lead to the damage in your brain. So we mentioned mitochondrial function being critical for your brain health. So at Fountain Life, yes, we can see a lot of signs of it in your brain. We can look for it in your brain MRI. We use another AI overlay that can we look at perivascular spaces. We look at all of the size of all your different brain regions, including your hippocampus and your ventricles. Those are all really important to see. Now, sometimes those can be a little later stage. By the time your brain changes, it's even more important to catch things earlier. We do neurocognitive testing for people to catch things, how is their brain actually functioning? What is their memory like? Catch it as early as possible, because most people get into denial. They try to hide things. Oh, my memory's not working quite as well. You cover up for it. So it's important to catch early. And now the other thing you have to look at is there's many, many causes for Alzheimer's, for example. You mentioned genetics. Yes, there's genetic causes. ApoE4 variants, for example, are higher risk, but there's so many things, other things. So we have to optimize all of that. You need to optimize your hormones. You need to optimize your blood sugar because blood sugar can be very damaging. High blood sugar can be very damaging to your brain. In Europe, they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes.
That's
right?
what I was going to say. Yeah.
Because it's such, yeah. We need to look at toxins, right? Because toxins can be damaging to your brain, especially mycotoxins and heavy metals and other types of toxins, some of the organochlorides. And, so really doing a good, making sure you're not exposed and helping to get rid of them if you are. Testing always helps, of course. And then making sure your brain gets the right nutrition. Your brain is made of fat, so you need enough fat in your brain to be able to function. There's Dr. Diane Goodenow. He's really done a lot of research on plasmalogens. So plasmalogens are a component of your cell membrane, and it turns out that people they're part of that phospholipid bilayer. They're a type of phospholipid that lives in your cell membranes, and there's a lot of them in the brain. And it turns out that people with Alzheimer's disease have very low levels of these plasmalogens, and that if you replace them, you can mitigate a lot of the effects. And they're involved in the acetylcholine transmission, which we know is impaired in Alzheimer's. And you can test for them and see what you have, right? So there are so many things that you can do to prevent it. And it's not just a one size fits all. We're now working with a company called Neurocode, where we're testing in the blood. We can look at p-tau and other early markers of Alzheimer's. So there's a lot of things you can look at, but you need to optimize all of them. And Dr. Bredesen used to use the analogy of the roof with 36 holes, or, if it's raining and you're getting wet and you plug 5 of the 36 holes, you're still going to get wet. If you plug 35 of the 36 holes, you're still going to get wet. So the idea is you've got to plug all of them. So when it comes to protecting your brain and optimizing brain function, you really have to look at, really approaching all of them.
Probably seem daunting. And of course you can prioritize in terms of, the most important ones.
Yeah. It's, in the hands of a provider that knows what they're doing. I think you can test for things, optimize, rule out, because not only is it going to help your brain, it's going to help the rest of you too. Right. And that TPE has also been shown to be effective and helpful for Alzheimer's as well.
Yeah. My wife, Amanda, was listening to a podcast with Bredesen, and he was talking about how oxygen is the key, whether the presence of it or not, affecting neurodegenerative.
Yeah, blood flow, right, to your brain is critical. Lymphatic flow, how our brain cleans out all the junk, right?
Right.
So so basically you get your cerebral spinal fluid flowing through your brain, capturing all the misfolded proteins, the amyloid, and that gets cleaned out. That happens every single night when we sleep. But it only happens when you sleep. So if you don't sleep, you're not cleaning out your brain. You're not getting rid of that junk. And so again, that's what I mean by the fundamentals, right? We're back to those fundamentals again. If we don't, like all of the nutrients your brain needs, that comes from your diet. We're now, I think, just starting to realize from a scientific perspective why those fundamentals are important, right? We're learning more and more about that. And so I think that's the exciting part, is because it's really easy to do.
Totally. A quick question. Are there different types of brain MRIs? Like I've heard of like fMRI. I don't know. Is that like functional MRI? Is that different than like a regular brain MRI? And if so, how are those different?
Yeah, it is. Functional MRI is different. So the regular brain MRI kind of looks at structure, that looks at kind of all of the brain regions, the structure we can get down. We can look at all the blood vessels. We do a, MRA that looks at all of the blood vessels. A lot of things we actually see when we do that are aneurysms in the brain, little outpouchings of your blood vessels that if they rupture, that's a stroke. That's not what you want. So catching those early is really important too. So I think a regular MRI is critical. We do the AI overlay. We get the volumetrics. We just saw hydrocephalus, what we call normal pressure hydrocephalus in one of our clients. And that was missed and she had a lot of symptoms, thinking she was getting Alzheimer's, when that's something that can easily be reversed if you just drain that fluid. So the fMRI is more of what we call a functional MRI, where it looks at kind of I guess the function, like pathways and the connectivity and, we call arterial spin. There's a whole bunch of components to that, but you can start to see more of the minuter details of what's going on in your brain versus just the structure.
Is one more important to get than the other?
Not really. I think it depends on what you're looking at, right? There's ways of sort of saying, wow, you don't have enough glutathione in your brain. If you look at functional MRI, I would start with everyone getting the foundational MRI. I think that's going to cover most bases. If you're having a lot of cognitive issues already, if you're really worried, then adding in the functional can be really helpful. I would
Starting
say
with the regular.
Yeah.
And you guys offer both?
We're just doing the basic. Well, not basic. It's pretty the advanced one, yeah. But yeah, we're doing the foundational MRI. Yeah, and we work with partners to do the functional MRI.
Yeah, and you said you can also overlay AI for that.
Yeah.
So, and I know this is a big part of the future of medicine is the application of AI. And we talked a little bit about the company that I mentioned, Clearly, which I think you guys are using to look at the
That's right.
heart health of the arterial with the CCTA. Are you using Clearly for the brain one too, or something different?
No, we're using another company. We've used a number of them, and we're always on the lookout for good ones. We're currently using one called BrainKey. BrainKey they've just been a great partner. Again, I don't like to always use the names because we are always looking for the best. But this is, again, we can characterize all of the different brain regions. We can look at white matters, whether you have those little white matter hyperintensities, which can often be a sign of, microvascular disease. We look at these perivascular spaces, which it's kind of the space around our blood vessels in our brain. As they get bigger, that is a sign that's associated with brain dysfunction or Alzheimer's. But one of the biggest things that we know is associated with that is lack of sleep. So there's the sleep. And so we can start to see, is sleep really affecting your brain function? Or
throw an Oura ring on them, get them in a sleep study. Yeah.
Get the Oura ring on, but it's just really, really critical to get good sleep so your brain cleans out. So yeah, we use all of, BrainKey, Clearly, and
then depending on the data from the brain MRI, are there specific protocols you put people on based on the specific data that is coming from the
yeah. So brain optimization, absolutely. And again, all of that is always in conjunction with the rest of the data. And I think that's why the comprehensiveness of the data is so important, because when you start to see that, we also know what people's blood sugar and hemoglobin A1C levels are. We also know what all of their lipids are. We also know their toxins and mitochondrial function. So we can really, really target and optimize it for the individual.
Of course. Yeah. And that's what it's all about, is that N equals one experience. And I think probably more than anything, the data can really help to wake people up and capture their attention to support their motivation for behavior change. Do you see data like making that sort of effect? 100%. It is one of the best things that you can do, because, you can sit here and say, I feel pretty good, right? I'm good. I got energy. I can function. Why do I need to test? Why do I need to take these supplements? Why do I need to change my diet? Well, you now go and get a CCTA and you start to see huge amounts of plaque in your arteries, or you start to see, you're like, yeah, maybe I better do something about it. So it's definitely a motivator for people. And the nice thing is it's also a feedback. So you can come back and you make those changes and you can see improvements. And that is also hugely motivating, right? Before and after testing. Yes.
Before and after. And then you also know that, what you're doing, if you're going to take the effort and make the lifestyle changes, take the supplements, do whatever, you also know that they're most likely going to work because I know I'm doing them, focused on what I need, not the general population.
Exactly. Just because someone tells you, oh, you got to be taking this supplement, doesn't mean that you need that as much as something else. And when you have that tailored approach, it increases the chances of it succeeding. So I've really learned a lot myself on this interview today, and really appreciate you kind of diving into a lot of different channels here and illuminating some important elements and therapies and foundational elements and the importance of data for the future of our own individual health journeys. Like you started with, and I know like Peter often says, the first things we want to prevent are what did you say? Like the dumb.
Don't die of something stupid.
Don't die of something stupid. Yeah. Don't die of something. Is that a book title?
I don't know. It should be.
Yeah. Peter, if you're listening to this, Peter, yeah, it'll be one of your like next speeches or books that you put out. Amazing. Well, any last parting words that you'd like to share with our audience that you think would be important to leave people with?
Yeah, no, I think kudos for being your audience, number one, because I think they're learning a lot on your podcast, and obviously have shown an interest in optimizing their health, right, and doing whatever they can. So I think that's fantastic. We need more of you out there. I think it's critical. I just really want to encourage everyone to be proactive. We have a little tagline, be the CEO of your health. You can do it. I mean, we live in such an amazing time right now where we have access to cutting edge diagnostics. We have access to data from the wearables to, so much. And we have so much understanding and so much that we can do about it. I mean, we're just really lucky. And I think I really just want to encourage everyone to take advantage of that.
Great final words. Beautiful. Thank you, Helen. Really appreciate you and joining today and sharing your expertise and some of these cutting edge applications for everyone here today. And so for those listening and wanting to dive deeper for themselves and possibly work with Fountain Life, what are some good next steps for them to take?
Yeah, go to fountainlife.com. Contact one of our program advisors and they can guide you to whatever your needs are. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, everyone. And looking forward to hearing how people enjoy this show. And thanks again, Helen.
Thank you, TJ. It's been fun.